Hey, Svitlana.
Hello, Arnie.
What are we talking about today?
Our topic today will be about creativity and imagination in chess.
Oh,
So,
I love
you're
it.
happy?
Yes, this is the main reason I love chess. So I'm very
Right,
curious. Okay,
right.
cool.
I know you yourself enjoy the beauty aspect of chess a lot, and to me, I think creativity is one of the most underestimated quality in the current chess world, since there's so much emphasis put on openings and memorizing all of the engine lines. But there's still many players out there in the world who continue showing us very creative chess.
Mhm.
So as you can see on the board right now, we have an Ivanchuk game, who is of course one of the people who the second you think about him, you right away think, oh my God, that guy is so creative. His games are never boring, always fun. Do you have maybe a favorite player who you think is really creative and you enjoy the games?
That's a very, very good question. So, I mean, when we look at Ivanchuk and this, as can see, this game is from 1996 and it's
Mhm.
against Alexei Shirov. So, Alexei Shirov in 1996 was an crazy player from a good way. He was also massively creative, massively attacking, and so I think part of creative play is often an attacking way of playing. Often it might not always be correct, but it is. It you do get positions where it just looks absolutely stunning or beautiful. And yeah, I appreciate that fact. And Vasily Ivanchuk is probably one of those people who, yeah, you immediately think about creative play. Morozevich was another
Right.
one, also the earlier Morozevich, because um, I'm doing this player types model with Carsten Müller. So every week we're speaking about the
Right.
different player types. And it's very interesting because normally players who have been very attacking and creative in the earlier years, they tend to get a little bit calmer the longer they play chess, a bit more pragmatic, yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, there are a couple of players, but I wouldn't know which one is in the top elite. But Ivanchuk, Morozevich, probably two of
Mhm.
those.
Yeah, that's true. I would completely agree. So in this game, this is Ivanchuk playing as white, and here is the moment where, well, you can try to guess the move he played, but this is what to me creativity is when you look. It's fine. It's looking at the moves that don't even look possible at first glance, and you include them in the calculations, and you still consider them, and every once in a while they will actually work out. So you'll be seeing a lot of sort of strange and imaginative moves today. And
Nice.
I think you're not going to have trouble finding them because you are that type of person yourself.
Well, let's see. So for you at home, of course, if this is something which hasn't been considered yet, creative playing, thinking about something which might be impossible, so this is probably a good way to approach this. Yeah, the more often you do it, the more it gets intuitive, and the more you get it into your brain. And most of the time, I just have to say, very often it doesn't work. But when it works,
The best thing in the
it's
world.
it's the best thing in the world. Yeah,
Yeah.
very nice. So I'm immediately thinking about the queen going to g7, which looks fantastic.
Hmm.
I think this has to be taken. I take back with the pawn. The rook probably has to go to g8, and I haven't been much further. Maybe the bishop goes to h3 would be quite interesting.
Okay.
Also, yeah, and then there's after queen going to g7, then the knight on c5 is hanging too. Oh, it's beautiful.
Hmm.
So this looks very
You
nice.
already you already know it. I like how you saw that in 1 second already. Maybe
Really,
maybe the fact that I said the move looks impossible at first glance, that's what helps.
it does.
So
True.
yeah, Queen G7. It's something you wouldn't normally consider, just putting the queen out there and sacrificing it just for a bishop and to get that pass pawn. And basically, your calculation was right. I think some normal moves here would have been okay too, but of course that would not have been on the topic today. But Ivanchuk had the option to be pretty much statically better if he
Hmm.
just exchanged some pieces and brought his rook onto the e file and kept everything like that on the seventh rank. Um, but so this would be a lot better, simple to play, and not risking much. But instead, um, he went for this risky sacrifice with the queen. And at the moment, White has only two pieces
Hmm.
for the queen. So this is one of the rare material imbalances, which still exists and it still is valid, especially when there's more pieces on the board. Then the two pieces can sometimes create an attack on the king, and it's not always that the queen is that much better, but it's still, of course, judging from a material point of view, a big difference. So, how would you basically evaluate it? Would you still take black? Would you take white already?
So
How do you
I have
feel?
to admit that the black pawns on C and D look frightening once the dust has settled. So this is
Yeah.
something which is might sting a little bit. Still, I would definitely go for white because
Mm-hmm.
first of all I made this move on G7, so now I have to really commit
Right.
to that.
Right.
And I think, I mean, there's still moves like bishop to h3, which I mentioned earlier. I guess the knight has this fantastic position. A7 might fall at one point. I definitely like white more still.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, judging by the computer, he says it's pretty much equal.
Huh.
So that means that there's chances for both sides. But yeah, so there is of course ideas for both. You mentioned the two pass pawns that black has in the center, and from the white's point of view, you can definitely gain back some material, maybe on a7, maybe the rook will fall. So this is why black decided to focus on his main on his main trump, which
I
is
thought so,
his d
yeah.
pawns, even if that came at the cost of a rook. So right now, taking the rook would not be good. And there's lots of things hanging. Which one do you think we take?
Yeah,
There's too many.
that's a very, very good. I mean, it looks very tempting to take on b7 with check. B with the yeah, maybe with the bishop.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, after swapping that away, maybe there are some nicer options. The more I look at it, so what would happen? Ah, that doesn't work. Okay. Huh. Okay, yeah, and now it gets a little bit more complicated. I think I would still go for taking the bishop on b7. I haven't decided yet with which piece though. Then there's still a7 with the rook, which is also quite nice. Maybe it's a bit too slow. I I don't think I should move the bishop on e3 because then my knight will just fall and then all my advantage will fade away. Mm,
Right, you're
bishop.
considering all the right things.
Oh, okay.
The rook is also hanging. We can sometimes think about the pawn on d4. So yeah, there's lots of things to consider. The one you said with bishop on b7 was the best capture.
Mm-hmm.
I think the knight is not as good
Mm,
because you
yeah,
might have to also consider them taking you on e3,
exactly. Yeah.
right? So that's also another thing which isn't an option in bishop b7.
Yes.
And after the rook takes, we're going to take the rook.
So, yeah. Do we take? And then
And
the bishop gets
here,
taken, right? Oh, no, it
no, the
cannot be.
bishop
Cannot
cannot be
get. Yeah,
taken
I just see
because of knight
d6. Yeah.
d6. So here black has basically an option. He can take back the knight, which would be the obvious move. Um, but it turns out that it is not the most pleasant endgame after that. So after the king takes, now one of the central pawns dies, and the bishop takes a really good diagonal and protecting that passed pawn, which was
That's
created right at the
helpful.
very beginning of
Yeah.
our exercise. And it's really a monster bishop, and also combined with the two rooks, this is one of those rook plus bishop imbalances, which just looks really good for the side with the rook and bishop, especially because of that passed pawn and because of the rook's activity, and they can just slowly start taking all of the pawns together. So I think Alexei Shirov saw that and decided to not take back on b7, which also kind of indicates that he can be a very creative player himself, that he doesn't just make the obvious moves, but he also considers something which doesn't look good at that doesn't look good at first glance. So this has a similar idea. So he basically trapped the knight and attacked the bishop on e3 at the same time. So one of the pieces will have to fall anyway. So that was just a different way of doing it, while trying to complicate matters a bit. So one of white's pieces has to go, but which one should it be? Do you think you want to keep the knight, or do you want to keep the bishop in such situation?
Yeah, let's think a bit for a moment. First of all, so this is the thing, which I like about the creative play. I have to think about the crazy, insane moves first. What happens with rook a7? Probably it can just be taken, and I have nothing left. Okay, so now that I have this out of my mind, I mean, is that so? Yeah, there is nothing. Is there nothing?
No, the moves themselves don't necessarily have to be crazy.
Good. So, I like it that the knight is up there, but of course the bishop might be helpful to protect the pawn on g7 after all. So I'm a bit torn here. Well, I think we can save the knight after the bishop takes on d4, and I believe that I have a little better feeling about those pawns, which aren't as strong anymore. After going with the knight to a5, I have some fork stuff again. I'm attacking c4 maybe with the rook behind it. So I would keep the knight. Yeah.
Right. So that's you decided the right piece to keep. It's as much as the bishops are generally preferred to knights, in this case, you can't keep the bishop without also keeping the central pawns alive. So, like you said, bishop d4 is definitely the top move to consider, because now you at least get rid of one of those pawns. It weakens them up, and then the knight can also do a lot of good things here, with going to d6 soon and winning one more pawn after that.
Yeah.
So keeping the knight is the right choice. Although I would also be tempted about the bishop. So what happened here is a few of the black's pawns fell, but also they exchanged it for the pawn on g7. So we're already getting quite close to the end. And finally, white at least somewhat equalized the material. So we have a rook and a knight, equal amount of pawns, a rook and a knight for a queen. So what would your evaluation of this endgame be? Which side would you rather play it for?
Good question. So hard to say, but I think with it has to be calculated. But at the moment, the white pieces are really in a nice attacking pattern. The next move might be b7 check with the rook. And first of all, black has to find a way out of this mess. And one thing which comes in mind is rook to b8. It's as one of the next things. But if it turns out that the white attack is not that strong. So let's assume the white pieces were on a1, b1, and c1, for example. I would prefer black. But like this, I think white can have a bit of an advantage. Maybe.
Right. So I think if the pawns start, if the two pawns that could potentially pose as danger, which are the A and the C pawn, if those pawns fall, then we have nothing to worry about. But yeah, this is another interesting type of imbalance, which can occur in the end game,
Yep.
and often it depends on how active the pieces are, like you said, and are there passed pawns for either of the sides, and that usually decides which type of pieces has the upper hand. And I swear, I don't know if you're like seeing the notation or something. You just like you're just on
Oh.
fire today with the moves. You're guessing every single move that that they're playing in the game.
I know all those games from 1996 by heart,
Of
so
course.
yeah.
So Rugby 8 was played, even though it was a mistake, you still found that option.
Oh my
Uh,
lord. Okay.
well, no, it's just because Black transposes into a sort
Oh.
of bad version of what they could have had. I still think that White would have been winning otherwise, if even if it wasn't for Rugby 8. But this just made them transpose into a less favorable version. And the
Yes.
thing is, the two rooks are really strong at like ganging up on some targets. And this is one of those cases where the C pawn becomes a target, and Black actually
Oh.
even resigned because the C pawn isn't going anywhere, and the fact that White will have a pass pawn themselves here
Yeah,
on the queen side
H5.
with the H pawn. I think it's really about the H4 pawn, the H pawn that will decide the whole game. The C pawn will get taken, or we can even sacrifice. Well, not sacrifice, but we can trade our two rooks for the queen and pawn here,
Mm. Oh yeah,
and
sure.
we pretty easily win the pawn endgame there with two pawns up.
Hmm.
So that was an example of Ivanchuk's game because he's, of course, one of the most creative players of our time.
Yeah.
And we have some more examples with the creative moves that
Nice.
you have to solve.
Let's go for it. I'm a bit
So
surprised about that the end game was given up. I think
mhm.
probably in the 90s it was. So, does this happen in the times we're living in too now?
I
Like,
think like the time of resignation depends on the level of the players, right? You often see that if
okay.
like the more you respect your opponent and the like you just kind of trust them to win it, you know?
Yes.
So even though I always tell my students don't resign, like of course don't make it unreasonable, right?
Yeah.
Don't play on for like 7 hours with the when there's absolutely like no chance and you're getting checkmated for 50 moves. But still, I always say about the not resigning thing. I think here it was particularly it was that early because Black cannot really pose any problems to the king. Like maybe if the king was a bit more unsafe, then he would try for perpetual. But here, the
Okay.
king is rather safe, and White's play is really really simple.
I understand. Good. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so the next one is a bit different.
Okay.
It's wait, no, not this one. That's gonna be after. I wanted to show this one. Um,
Ooh.
it's so one of the another type of puzzles that I think really boost creativity are studies. So this is just one of those things. Have you ever solved studies maybe as when you learned chess as a child for the first time, or that was never part of your training?
Never really part of my training. I solved studies with you, with Lawrence Trent, and Trent's Tactics with Elisabeth Peetz in Ellis Schatztruhe, the German version
Mm-hmm.
of what we're having here. But studies was never. I always think that's crazy and amazing and beautiful, but it
Mm-hmm.
was never a thing. Yeah, and it's an interesting point you're mentioning because it would fit into the creative play because it's
Right.
and this is why I'm always fascinated by studies and studying and all those beautiful
Mm-hmm.
moves. But yeah, I'm actually doing it far too little.
Yeah, well, it's not about how many you do it. Some people have never done it in their entire lives and they're really good
Hmm.
players still. I think it's something that hasn't been as much of a big trend in the modern, coaching. Because yeah, there is, as I mentioned, more of an accent on openings and getting good position in the first place. And these studies, I I actually had my coach, my very first coach when I just started. I did do a lot of studies like that.
Huh.
Um, and like he gave a lot of like just impossible positions, and you had to find the fastest mate, like mate in one only. Like you can't mate in two, you have to find the mate in one,
Okay.
which I used to hate a lot. I used to hate them so much because I'm like, I'm never getting this ever in an actual game. Why do I have to find the mate in one if
Uh-huh.
I could just comfortably mate in three? You know,
Yeah.
it's not practical,
Like
but
learning maths in school or something.
right, but I do see the point, and I am kind of thankful for that, looking back at it, because I do think that solving studies develops creativity
Good
a lot
point.
more.
Yes, yes, yes.
And it's something that should be considered, especially giving it to children, so that they don't only see the memorization part of it, but they also sort of get the sense of beauty from chess, and learn to appreciate it for some nice positions like that. So here's one of those puzzles. This one is not very difficult, but since we're talking about creativity, it fits the theme well. So black to play here, and you're gonna try to make a draw because
Black to play.
yep.
I was
So
just
your pawns are
okay.
going up. The black pawns are going up.
Yes.
The white pawns are going down. So both of the pawns are really close to their promotion squares. What are we going to do?
Oh. Oh, that is so funky. Okay. Okay, so the pawn on b7 actually goes to, let's say, c8 or b8 and can become a queen, while we can get a queen on a1. But that cannot be it, of course. That would be
So if we get the
crazy.
queen on a1, then let's just say what's going to happen. So they are going to play b takes c8.
Hmm.
And if you can notice, you're sort of stuck
I
and
am.
out of moves, and then you just have to move the queen to f6 probably. I mean, what other move do you have? I think queen f6 or queen b2. Sorry, not f6. I'm looking at it from white side. Queen
Exactly.
c3 or
Yes.
queen b2 are the two options, and you have to give it up.
Yeah. I mean, I can take it on d4, but then again, it's a mate in a one. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So let's rethink and reconsider. What can we do? Well, we can go to c1 with the king, which is super weird because then a queen, and no, it cannot work. That cannot, or can it? Well, we could maybe. Well, the question is, can we escape? Maybe there is a better way. So what would be if we do not get a queen? What would happen if we get a knight? Doesn't knight? No, knight. What happens if we get a knight? We get a knight, they get a queen. We
They
go
get a
to
queen.
b3 with the knight and protect.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, also remember that he can promote on b8.
okay, yeah, but
So
if
he
he
can do that and then take with check.
if the if the promotion is on b8, and then he can take with check. Okay, that doesn't work either. Okay, so what else can we do? Oh, that's fun. So, have you at home, do you know this study? Have you ever seen it before? If so,
I
skip
don't
this
know if it's
chapter.
that famous.
It's from 1912. My goodness.
Yeah, and it's only the end of it. So the actual study itself went on longer than that. But
Wow.
this is the
Okay. So what happens if we take our knight to b6 and then jump to c4 after the
So if
queen?
we play knight b6, they're going to take on b2 and get rid of one of your pawns.
Not nice.
Yeah, and unfortunately, as much as we would love him to take our knight
He doesn't take our
and make
knight.
the stalemate, he's not going to, and
Yeah.
can play whatever else, like even e6, and that would be over.
Okay, there must be now the
You were
longer
so
I'm
close. You were really, really close.
Oh,
I thought you
really?
were gonna get it at that
Okay,
moment.
but the longer I think about it, the more I think that it has to be a stalemate because
Right.
for some reason I'm always thinking of like how can I win this, which is a bit
Right. So this is a study
yeah.
where you make a draw. You don't
Yes.
need the win.
Okay. So what would happen after how to get this stalemate? And let's first one obvious thing which I didn't think of yet. Let me quickly take the knight with the king on a1. What happens then? Then no, it's not a stalemate because they take on c8, and yeah, or like that even doesn't matter.
They take here first, and then we'll take
Yes.
the knight.
Okay. Oh yes. Okay. Okay. So if we go with the
We're
knight,
so close.
if we go to b6 with the knight again, and
Okay.
then
Bishop b2.
bishop b2 exactly, and then we go with the knight to let's see.
I see you want to go to like f7 or something and
Yeah,
make
but
draw.
it's not working.
I mean, not f7, f2. You see, because
Yes.
the board is flipped with such weird settings.
It
Yeah.
is. It is. Yeah, I know what you're feeling. I wish I would mistake the squares like you do, because I don't even know which square to move to before I read like, okay, wait, that's G line and
But at
two.
least, I say the square and you know what I'm what I'm talking about, even if I'm
Definitely,
talking about
luckily,
the wrong
yes.
one.
Okay, so what about knight to a7 then? Queen? Oh, okay. Well, you have to react to it because after knight a7, I could go to knight c6 and then to knight b8 and block the queen from evolving. Also, those pawns, can they do it? Maybe not. So what about knight a7? I think the
Knight
queen.
a7. Well, I would, of course, consider the queen.
And that's a very good idea to get the queen, I guess. So we leave this.
And mate on b2 might be a bit of a problem.
Oh, damn it!
You were so close. I thought you were gonna get it at that moment
But
when you
now the confusing
said.
part about it is where was I so close? Because I named a couple of moves. So
Yeah.
I mean,
If I tell you, you'll get it right away.
I see. Okay. Now, okay, what about let's take on a1 again and get a different piece than a queen. Let's take. Oh, it's not it. Okay, let's solve it for the sake of it. So.
What? You were literally about to do it. You said, "Let's get a different piece," and didn't say which one.
Okay, so another king. No, that's not working. Let's get.
Unfortunately,
Why is? Oh,
What?
oh, it's so. Oh God! Oh my goodness! Yes, 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 yes. Ah, why didn't I immediately say it from the start? I was really close.
Yeah, you were so close.
Have you found it out now yourself? Yes. If you haven't known it before, now you know it, right? If not, think about it for the next couple of seconds. Which piece is the one winning? Because Svitlana gave us a hint in the very beginning, a very obvious hint, which I didn't catch, unfortunately. She said, well, the queen goes to b2 or c3 or even d4. But what if this piece wouldn't be able to move? It's a rook, of course.
It is a rook.
Because
you're right.
obviously the queen cannot go to b8 to give a check, because then we would checkmate. And finally, I have my...
Exactly. So you can have, you see, even winning chances. You even got winning chances with that. So, yeah, here, this is why White is not able to take the queen on b8. So he will have to take the one on c8, and that leads to stalemate.
Ah, that's
So
juicy, beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, so that is an interesting and creative one. And you see, sometimes the brain just doesn't even think in that way because you're not used to it.
Ah,
So
yes,
one more.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. Please,
Okay,
please.
so the next one is a bit more normal, from once again an actual game. And yeah, so you're playing here as a black. I'm gonna
Good.
try to find a move that Mr. Jabava found. Um,
Has to be bishop h3, right?
you found it so quickly. Yes, it is bishop h3.
It looks
So
so tempting, yeah.
it looks really tempting, and it is not a very difficult move to understand once you see it. But I think it's seeing it in the first place and getting past that. Even looking at it, because it's just a protected square, and the bishop never goes to h3. When is it ever going to h3?
Very rarely, yes.
Out of the blue. So you can already tell how much of a creative person you are, because these moves come really, really easily to you.
This from you means a lot to me. Also, Jobava, by the way, very creative player. By the way,
Right.
he was a player who's still playing on a very high level, and he's freakingly creative, not only with chess but also with his haircuts and colors.
That is true. That is true. That's how you can tell. So bishop h3 was the right move here. And of course, the point itself, the tactic itself is very simple. That if in case of the capture, we are going to win the queen with knight f3.
Yeah.
So the bishop was, of course, untouchable, but even getting it there in the first place was not an easy thing to see, because even after castles, you start to wonder, what even is the bishop doing there? Do you have a follow-up to your bishop h3 move?
Well, now I would. Yeah, there's a couple of nice things. So how to do this best? First thing is g2, maybe the sacrifice the king has to take, but maybe it's a bit. But maybe the queen, the knight takes on f3. So there's always this check. Oh, there's so many things to. So maybe even g4. God, I can't stop thinking about all those beautiful moves. Something has to work, right?
Right. Yeah, there has to be an attack. Once your bishop is there, there's
Yeah.
already no going back, because if you went there, you're not going to come back next.
One maybe important thing you're just telling about this is, and this is what, so I have to pledge out a warning to those who have a little bit of a weaker level. Once you commit to one thing, there's no going back. This is something I love and live for very often, and it doesn't always help, because those chess players who are title players, grandmasters, or yourself, they know when to pull back.
Right, right. I was going to say, if you're gonna make it like generalize it as a rule, I was gonna disagree, but you actually took it into the right direction.
Exactly, because yeah, in our older lessons, we saw your games a couple of times already, when you also were, although they had a strong attack, you were taking a retreating move, and it was a better choice, for example. And this is and this requires a lot of braveness. To not, because I think it is braver to sometimes take the piece back instead of going all in. Sometimes because I think this going all in often is the crazy variation, and it's beautiful if it's working, but maybe it's,
and it can be a problem. Like both extremes of this can be a problem. Like if you make defensive and backwards moves too much, as opposed to only thinking about attacking moves and moves forward, and just missing the more defensive ones, or the maneuvering ones where the pieces are moving back. So I know players of both type that have trouble making both types of moves, and it's more of a golden middle, where I think mostly you should be making moves forward, but also not disregarding those backward moves that you're talking about. And I mean, chess is not really like poker. You didn't just like bet all of your money and went all in. Even if theoretically you can do, if you sacrifice the queen, I mean, that's kind of the all in of chess.
Yes.
But still, if you haven't sacrificed material yet. There's always some comeback options.
Absolutely. So
And you made it into a really good rule. Yeah.
I made my decision. I think I will. So the bishop cannot be taken
Right.
anyway. So we will stay. We will leave it there. So we will
Yeah.
play a more or less silent move. I think I like g4. I would play g4.
Exactly.
Oh, all
G4.
right.
Yeah. You're guessing all of these moves. I think this is
Oh,
just your thing.
piece of
This is
cake.
just this is what you like. So without this follow-up, the bishop trick doesn't really make too much sense why the bishop is standing there. And we are just going to completely take control of the light squares here. So this is there is of course some bishop g2 following up, and if white moves forward with f4, now we have this knight of 3 trick. After which
That
the
is
G file
nice.
opens up with really, really big strength, and um, black is going to regain his sacrifice material. He can always take one of the pieces, and the white king is just completely
Exactly.
open. So
Yeah,
something like this would
and
be good.
c3 is lost, for example, now too,
Yeah,
which I didn't see in the very beginning, but that's probably
that's
the
true.
main
So if
reason. Yeah.
this knight wants to save himself and leave, then c3 will,
Oh,
well, he can leave to
oh.
d4. If he leaves to some other place like g3, which is more defensive, then of course we're going to take. But this, I mean, if you really were concerned about material, you can take the rook, which I wouldn't want to do. But the whole point was that
g8.
the whole g file is open. I think rook
Exactly.
g8 would be good, for example.
Has to work, yeah.
Lots of good moves. And the king cannot really escape either because, well, we can always tell him to come back where we need him to be.
And now we can
So,
take on
right.
d4, I think, and or how what
You can do
let
a
us,
lot of things.
yeah, well, there's plenty of options, I think. Maybe this
I
is not
would
even the best,
consider
yeah.
other things. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things to do. It's basically about the king just being paralyzed and stuck, and you're gonna be fine here, even if you
Yes.
make a slower move, or whatever. And the king just cannot escape the attack in the long run.
Yeah.
So the other option was, of course, to take on g4, and we can consider taking back with a few things like the pawn, even though this would look a bit strange. You're trapping the bishop just there forever,
Yeah.
but this was also possible and better for black. But he finally brought the bishop back here. The bishop accomplished his job, and it just quickly became clear that black is a lot better with just his piece placement, and the bishop accomplished his job very
Ah,
well.
so there we have
So,
it, kind of, right? Yeah. It's also not a
right.
complete commitment, but the job has been done. The creative mood
Mhm.
has been played, has forced white into this position, and black has this beautiful. Although the king didn't even castle, doesn't need to castle.
Yeah.
Looks just overwhelmingly good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I will still show the end.
Hmm.
So White could have defended better, but he made a few inaccurate moves with such as bishop d4.
Oh, okay.
And now, which one of her pieces do you think needs improvement? There's one piece which right now just makes
Well, it's
a strong move.
the rook on h8
Yeah, that's one of
can
them.
probably go to g8, I guess.
It can, but
Or
that's
yeah.
there's an intermediate move after which we go to g8.
So how about h6 instead?
Oh, rook to h6 to play rook g6?
Oh, okay. So we place the bishop to h6. This is the pattern
Right.
I was looking at after making the move to g4 earlier
Mm-hmm.
already. Yeah, and it just takes this super strong
Right.
line there.
So
Yeah.
before moving the rook to g8, which is where it wants to go in the first place, you can try to look for those intermediate moves, which are like not losing any time. So a
Hmm.
move like bishop h6 doesn't lose any time because they have to move the queen anyway. And then you just keep going with your plan with rook g8. And I think black is much, much better already. And the attack just keeps going. And white was having a lot of difficulties with defending. And even though he did give it his best, put the rook to d5, and it looks good, except it does nothing, which is which is a shame. But anyways, it ended with bishop e3, another nice creative move,
Oh.
which leads to the mate on g2 later, and we kick out the queen with full force. So that was the last example for like creative moves, such as even bishop h3 was not really a difficult tactic per se. It was just a two-move tactic, so it doesn't have to be difficult. And that's the thing about creative moves. Once your mind is open to it, you're going to find them so much more often in the games. And even if they don't occur in the actual game, you can have it in your calculations. Like you can have it, you can try considering different options, thinking about it, and you'll see you're going to have so much more fun playing chess, and you're gonna, at least that's how I started liking chess more, is when I started looking at sometimes crazy ideas like that, and I just kept realizing that, wow, this is just so nice. I wish it worked. It doesn't, but but at least you're having fun calculating it.
Absolutely, yes. No, it definitely cannot harm, because calculation is always very good, and then you get a feeling for it at one point. If you have done all those crazy stuff a lot of times, then you just see like, wait a second, that'll work. And I have to admit, in bullet and blitz games, sometimes I just sacrifice my. Normally, it's in the beginning, in the opening, or in the middle game. I sacrifice one of my pieces, going right into the pawn structure, getting 2 pawns back, and a massive attack. And if you only have a minute or 3 minutes or 5 minutes left, that is a tough situation for your opponent to try to defend correctly. And it works pretty often. I don't always do it. I do it on a nuanced way. So I'm not going absolutely mental with it, but sometimes I go, this has to work. Bam. And
yeah, I've played blitz against you. I know what you mean.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Svitlana and I, we always play a couple of games after our show. That has to happen, of course, because it's always fun.
I actually have a few a few books that I gave more attention to lately about like the creative aspect of chess. So the famous one is Imagination in Chess.
I think I heard of that too.
Yeah, that's the famous one. It's a bit of the puzzles are outdated now because of it wasn't with the engine, So that's like an old classic, which a lot of players have recommended, and in terms of creativity. And one of the more modern ones, which I really liked, is Excelling at Chess Calculation by Agard. But that's more of a that's just another quite light read, which lets you do those tactics which aren't even necessarily sometimes there's multiple solutions, but it's more about opening your mind up to different possibilities, and sometimes giving a bit of unconventional ideas than you would see normally. But there's a lot of books, of course, that do it rather well, and any calculation book will still help you with your creativity, but that's just a few that I found recently.
Thanks a lot for those recommendations. Yeah, that's I think you never should underestimate being creative in chess. And everybody has a different reason to like chess, and I found it from the very beginning. People were wondering when I said, like, well, how can you be creative? You're just calculating on chess. And of course, people didn't know about chess that much because they couldn't see or understand what the creative part about it is. There was even a quite famous player who said, I think it was Wesley So recently, who said, like, 960 chess, for example, or Bobby Fischer random chess, that he loves it so much because one of the biggest part is to be creative. And I can absolutely feel for this.
I think it's one of those aspects of chess that has a really big future in terms of like what's going to happen in the next maybe few decades. I think there's going to be more attention given to 960, because I think a lot of the professional players are sort of I wouldn't say suffering, but suffering a bit from all the keeping up with theory and everything. It's a lot of work, and it takes away that creative aspect, like you said. So that's why 960 is a good solution to the theory being memorized, which it will be memorized eventually too, right? it's
Oh my,
probably inevitable
yeah.
to prevent people from learning the theory there.
Imagine that, like, oh, it's position 148. So how do I open again with that? Ah, yeah, this was this. This is the French,
Yeah.
and all of that. Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thanks a lot for watching. We see each other soon again. Thank you so much, Svitlana. Wishing you all a lovely weekend. Bye bye.